You don't cast out demons, these 7 shadow vibrations do it for you. What if everything we were taught about casting out darkness was wrong, not entirely false, but incomplete? What if we've been so obsessed with light, with purity, with resistance to the shadow, that we've missed the real secret? I'm going to say something that might break centuries of spiritual tradition. You don't cast out demons by yelling at them, praying louder, or fasting longer. You cast them out by becoming something they can't survive in. You don't have to fight darkness when you learn how to embody the vibrations that dissolve it effortlessly. Demons, whether you see them as literal entities, psychological patterns, ancestral curses, or energetic parasites, don't leave because you tell them to. They leave because they realize there's no longer a home for them in your system. Let's get real. We've all been haunted. Haunted not just by what's outside of us, but what's inside. The thoughts that spiral at 2 a.m. The shame that clings to us like smoke. The rage we inherited from our bloodline. The deep, aching loneliness that no amount of connection seems to fill. We've tried everything: meditations, mantras, trauma therapy, sage, exorcisms. And yet, sometimes the darkness doesn't move. Why? Because we're still resisting it instead of transforming it. We treat demons like invaders when, in truth, they've been cohabiting with us, feeding off our fear, nesting in our unhealed wounds, whispering through our addictions. That's not possession, that's permission. And until we learn to vibrate at frequencies that make those agreements impossible, we can't truly be free.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
So here's the truth. There are 7 shadow vibrations that don't exile darkness, they exile the need for it. These aren't positive vibes-only traits. These aren't love and light bumper stickers. These are deep, primal soulfed frequencies. They're not always comfortable. They don't always look pretty, but they work. They are the mother tongue of the soul. And when you embody them, demons energetically or metaphorically have no choice but to leave. Not because you told them to, but because they can't breathe in your presence anymore. The first time I realized this, I was sitting in silence at the edge of a jungle temple in Southeast Asia. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I hadn't spoken in 5. The sun was setting in this eerie blue-orange hue, and I felt something crawl up my spine, not physically, but energetically. A presence, something ancient, something watching. I didn't panic. I didn't pray. I listened. And I heard it clearly. I don't fear your light. I feed on it, if it's ungrounded. I only leave when you become too true for me to touch. That shook me, because it meant all my spiritual performance, my rituals, my affirmations, even my sacred objects meant nothing if I wasn't embodying truth. You see, darkness doesn't flee from performance. It flees from authenticity. Not surface-level authenticity, but bond deep, saulankud, I'll not abandon myself authenticity. And that's just one of the 7. There's more. Each vibration is a sword forged in a different fire. Some are birthed through grief, some through rage, some through surrender. But all of them require one thing: that you stop trying to be spiritual and start being real. That you stop trying to cast out and start calling in the parts of you you've abandoned. Because demons don't just haunt us, they mirror us. They reflect where we are still in inner conflict. And when that conflict ends, so does their reign. I want you to sit with this. What if the demon isn't the enemy, but the echo of a truth you've refused to embody? What if it's not trying to destroy you, but to reveal you? That's when the game changes. That's when you stop being afraid of the dark and start becoming the kind of presence that ends it without effort. You walk into a room and the energy recalibrates. Not because you're special, but because you're honest. You've integrated. You're no longer leaking vibration through fear, shame, or self-denial. That's power, not performative power, energetic authority. And that's what this entire journey is about. Over the next 3 parts, I'm going to walk you through each of the 7 shadow vibrations. But I'm not just going to define them, I'm going to initiate you into them. This isn't theory. This is alchemy. This is the kind of wisdom that doesn't fit into spiritual textbooks or Instagram quotes. This is the kind of wisdom that lives in caves, in tombs, in the silence between your breaths. And it's time to remember. Before we continue, I want you to ask yourself something. Not with your mind, but with your nervous system. Are you ready to become uninhabitable to everything that was never meant to live in you? Are you ready to stop resisting demons and instead become the vibration that makes them irrelevant? Because if you are, then we journey deeper. And what's coming next isn't just information, it's transformation. You won't just learn these 7 vibrations, you'll begin to embody them. And when you do, nothing untrue will be able to stay near you. Not entities, not people, not patterns, not even your own self-sabotage. Because each of these vibrations is a portal, and when you pass through them, you'll lose the version of yourself that needed demons to learn your lessons. You'll stop casting them out, you'll outgrow them. The vibration of devouring truth, why authenticity, is the first frequency demons can't digest. Let's begin with the first and most essential of the 7, the vibration of devouring truth, not surface level honesty. Not curated vulnerability. I'm talking about a truth so raw, so unflinching, so all-consuming that anything false cannot coexist in its field. This vibration is not something you perform. It's something you become. It's not about telling the truth to others, it's about no longer lying to yourself. That's the difference between spiritual showmanship and spiritual sovereignty. One speaks truth to be seen. The other lives truth because there is no other way to breathe. This is the frequency that makes demons energetic parasites, thought forms, ancestral imprints choke. Because demons don't thrive in darkness. They thrive in pretending. In the subtle ways we deny our desires, avoid our pain, and shrink from our power. Truth doesn't just expose them, it evicts them. Not because it attacks, but because it reveals. And revelation is their kryptonite. You don't have to scream at a demon when you become a mirror so clear it sees itself and dissolves. That's the power of devouring truth. But here's the part most people avoid. Truth will cost you. It will cost you the version of yourself that was still trying to be liked, accepted, praised. It will cost you the comfort of fitting in, the illusion of belonging in places that require your silence. It will strip away every identity that was built to keep you safe. And that's why most people resist it. They say they want freedom, but they don't want to pay an ego death. But you're different. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be real. That's why the first vibration isn't love. It's not peace. It's not joy, it's truth. Because without truth, every other vibration becomes a performance. So what does it look like to embody this? It looks like sitting with your jealousy instead of pretending you're above it. It looks like admitting you're still bitter about what happened 5 years ago, even though you've moved on. It looks like saying, I don't trust myself yet, instead of hiding behind spiritual affirmations. It's not about being dramatic. It's about being undeniable. When you walk in devouring truth, people feel it. They may not like it. They may call you intense. But they will never be able to lie around you comfortably again. And that's the point. I've watched people lose entire communities when they stepped into this vibration. I've watched families fall apart, jobs disappear, relationships implode. Not because truth is destructive, but because everything that was built on pretense couldn't survive the light. And in that collapse, something beautiful emerges, your real life, your real friendships, your real mission, your real identity, not the one you were given, but the one you remembered. This vibration also requires that you stop outsourcing your truth to others. Stop waiting for someone to validate what your soul already knows. Stop needing a guru, a healer, an algorithm to confirm your path. When you're in the vibration of devouring truth, you become your own oracle. You stop asking, "Is this okay?" and start saying, "This is me." And in that moment, anything that was feeding off your doubt begins to starve. Let me ask you something real. What truth have you been avoiding because you're afraid it will cost you too much? And what if that truth is the very key that unlocks your freedom? Because here's the paradox. The longer you avoid truth to protect your life, the more your life becomes a cage. But the moment you choose truth, no matter the cost, you realize that what falls away was never really yours to begin with. You were just holding on to it because it made you feel safe. But truth isn't safe. Truth is sovereign. And sovereignty is the soil where demons can't root themselves. This is why authenticity isn't just a buzzword. It's a weapon. It's a gate. It's a frequency that doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. When you walk in devouring truth, you don't need to cast anything out, because nothing false can come in. You become a firewall. You become uninhabitable to anything that requires distortion to survive. And so, the first shadow vibration is not about light, it's about fire. The fire of truth, the kind that burns away illusions, false identities, and energetic parasites with equal indifference. It's not personal. It's pure. And once you ignite it, there's no going back. You don't get to unknow what you now know. You don't get to unfeel what your body has confirmed. But in exchange, you get yourself. Fully. Unapologetically. Uncontrollably. And when you live like that, the only thing left to cast out is the belief that you were ever possessed by anything but your own power. The vibration of sacred rage, how your anger is not a sin but a sword. Most people have been taught to fear their own anger, to suppress it, to hide it behind politeness, spiritual bypassing, or forced forgiveness. But what if I told you that your rage, yes, that primal burning, sometimes uncontrollable fire inside of you is not your enemy? What if it's not a sign of your brokenness, but of your clarity? What if sacred rage is not something to be healed, but something to be honored? Because here's the truth, demons don't fear your love. They've learned how to manipulate it. They know how to twist your compassion into codependency. But sacred rage, that's a vibration they can't survive. Let's be clear. I'm not talking about reactive anger, the kind that lashes out, blames, or destroys without aim. That's wounded rage. And yes, it can be dangerous. But beneath that is something older, something wilder, something holy. Sacred rage is the fire that rises when truth has been silenced too long. It's the roar of your soul saying enough. It's not about revenge. It's about restoration. It's not about chaos. It's about correction. Sacred rage doesn't burn bridges, it burns illusions. It doesn't destroy people, it destroys lies. And that's why it's one of the 7 shadow vibrations that cast out darkness without effort. Because no entity, no toxic pattern, no parasitic energy can root itself in a being who has reclaimed their right to feel and express rage without shame. Why? Because rage is the language of boundaries. Rage is what happens when your soul recognizes an injustice and your body refuses to stay silent about it. And when you suppress that, you don't become peaceful, you become possessible. You become an open field for demons who feed on silence, submission, and self-abandonment. Well, think about it. How many times have you been violated energetically, emotionally, spiritually, and instead of roaring, you rationalized? You explained. You forgave too soon. You tried to be high vibration. And in doing so, you handed the keys over to darkness. Not because you were weak, but because you were trained to believe that rage is unholy. But that's the great lie. Rage is not the opposite of love. Rage is love when it's been pushed to its edge. I've seen people heal decades of trauma, not through meditation, not through mantras, but through one raw, sacred, unfiltered scream that finally said what no one ever let them say. That's not regression. That's reclamation. That's the moment your energy field stops being a doormat and becomes a fortress. Because sacred rage doesn't say, I hate you. It says, I will no longer betray myself to keep you comfortable. Can you feel it? That heat in your belly? That pressure behind your chest? That's not dysfunction. That's awakening. That's your body remembering that it was never meant to be silent in the face of injustice. That it was never meant to suppress its roar to keep the peace in a room filled with lies. And when you let that rage come through not recklessly, but righteously, you become a frequency that demons cannot enter. Because sacred rage is not chaotic, it is surgical. It removes what doesn't belong. Let me ask you something that might change your life. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to be angry, not to justify it, not to fix it, but to feel it in its full, wild intelligence? And what would happen if you stopped fearing your rage and started listening to what it's trying to protect? Because here's the secret, sacred rage is always guarding something precious, your innocence, your boundaries, your voice, your truth. And the moment you stop shaming it, you gain access to a level of power that no parasite can manipulate. You stop being nice, you stop being safe, you stop being palatable, and you become sovereign. Sacred rage is the guardian of your truth. It's the part of you that says, I don't care if they leave. I don't care if they misunderstand. I will not betray myself one more damn time. And when you live from that place, not in every moment, but when the moment calls for it, you become spiritually uninhabitable. Not because you're angry all the time, but because you're honest enough to be angry when truth demands it. This vibration doesn't require you to yell. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a silent stare that speaks louder than words. Sometimes it's a decision made in solitude that says, I'm done. And in that moment, the energy shifts. The demons that used to thrive on your compliance, your silence, your fear, they scatter. Because sacred rage is the sound of a soul that has returned to itself. So no, you don't cast out demons with incense and holy water alone. You cast them out by becoming a temple that burns with truth and refuses to be violated again. And that temple doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be awake. And rage, sacred, clear, embodied rage is one of the most awakening forces the soul contains. The vibration of unapologetic wholeness. Why demons starve in the presence of a fully integrated soul. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when you stop trying to be healed and you start being whole. And when you reach that moment, everything changes, not because you've fixed every wound, but because you've accepted every part of who you are. That acceptance, that deep, cellular level permission to be fully you, messy, radiant, flawed, divine, is the final vibration. It's the one demons can't touch, because what they feed on isn't evil. They feed on fragmentation. They survive in the cracks between your shame and your soul. So when there are no more cracks, when you've owned every shadow, kissed every scar, integrated every part, you become a being of unapologetic wholeness. And in that presence, darkness has nothing left to hold on to. Let's make one thing clear. Wholeness is not perfection. It's the opposite. Perfection is a mask. Wholeness is the removal of all masks. It's standing in the center of your being and saying, I am all of it. The light, the dark, the laughter, the grief, the rage, the tenderness, I claim it all. And when you do that, you stop leaking energy. You stop creating gaps where entities, patterns, and loops can enter, because you're not trying to hide anything anymore. And when there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to haunt. Most of us were taught to chase the light, to deny the parts of ourselves that weren't spiritual enough. But the truth is, anything you exile within yourself becomes bait for the very forces you're trying to escape. Every piece of you that you disown becomes a doorway for something untrue to enter. That's why integration is not just emotional, it's energetic armor. It's not about being high vibe. It's about being whole vibe. No gaps, no shame, no pretending. You see, when you're fragmented, you attract mirrors who reflect your disowned parts. That's why the same people, the same patterns, the same pain keeps showing up, not to punish you but to reunite you. Every trigger is a treasure map. Every heartbreak is a homecoming in disguise. But most people keep rejecting the messenger, not realizing that every unhealed fragment is just another version of them asking to be loved back into the circle. I've watched people spend decades trying to purify themselves only to get more haunted. Why? Because they mistook purity for rejection. They kept cutting away pieces of themselves in the name of growth, not realizing that true growth is inclusion. And when they finally stopped fighting their flaws, when they finally said, "Yes, even this part belongs," the haunting stopped. The loop ended. The demons left not because they were cast out, but because they were no longer needed. Unapologetic wholeness is a vibration that cannot be faked. It's not confidence. It's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's the deep, unshakable knowing that nothing within you is unworthy of love. Even the parts that once lied, once betrayed, once ran from truth. You don't have to justify them. You just have to hold them. And in your holding they heal. Not into something else, but into themselves. Let me ask you something so real it might sting. What parts of you are still waiting for your love? What fragments have you left behind in the name of being more spiritual? And what if your power lives in the very parts you've been trying to fix? Because here's the final truth: you don't become powerful by becoming better. You become powerful by becoming whole. And when you are whole, you don't need to cast out demons. They cast themselves out. They lose access. They lose traction. They lose their grip, because they were only ever attached to the parts of you you refuse to claim. So this is your invitation: not to fight, not to purify, not to escape, but to integrate. To stand in the fullness of who you are and say, "I don't need to be lighter. I need to be deeper." And in that depth, nothing false can survive. Not entities, not illusions, not fear. Just you. All of you. And that, my friend, is the most sacred vibration of all. You don't cast out demons. You become someone they can't live inside. And when that happens, you don't wage war. You radiate wholeness. And in that presence, they disappear.